So today we're going to look at chapter 2 on forecasting and budgeting. And forecasting and budgeting is very, very important, particularly for owners and managers of an operation. Now, I know a lot of you want to become a chef, but as a chef, you become part of the management team. Is that correct? All right. Your duty is to keep quality up, deliver good quality meals in an effective way, but most importantly, controlling your cost. Now, as a chef, what kind of cost do you think you have control over? Anybody?
The quantity of meats you want to have.
Food, okay, so you have some quality, you have some control over your cost for food. What else? Labor, because you're the guy making the what? Schedule. So you're watching food costs, you're watching labor cost, and as we said earlier, those are two of our biggest costs when it comes to running a restaurant. Now, you may be the most talented chef and you can cook a pot of water and make it taste good, whatever, but you still got to be able to do what? The numbers. And so what happens is if you're working 40 or 50 hours a week, you may be on the line cooking a lot, but you also are able to do what? Sit down, take time to do things like possibly ordering, training, so there are a lot of other things within the job of a chef that's very important here. And so budgeting and forecasting is important because when the owner or manager comes to you, they're going to ask your opinion. How much labor do you need in the kitchen? Where do you think the food cost is? Because you're the guy every week order and say, well, steak went up 20 cents this week. Fish went up, right? So you're the guy who has to say, we need to raise prices because the food cost is going up. All right. So you should be part of that team that explores and works on new and better budgets here. So let's spin over to page 22. And a budget is a plan that indicates operations, financial objectives, and financial standards. All right. Probably you all have some kind of a budget for yourself personally, correct? And how does it work? Well, here's the money I have, I get from work or whatever. And here's the money I spend. The problem with personal budgeting is what? Too many days in the month, okay? Because you run out of money before you run out of month, right? Is that everybody's problem, correct? All right. Well, you can't do that in business. How come? Well, then you go broke. And Cisco likes to get paid. Because Cisco don't get paid, they don't deliver any what? Food. Got nothing to sell, okay? So you have to do a better job in budgeting. So we need to have a good firm budget. Most places do an annual, yearly budget. A good time to do that is the end of one year, like last year in November, December, we proposed a budget for 2019. All right. Now, realizing that I'm now forecasting a whole year in advance, how accurate or inaccurate do you think my budget might be? Anybody? Well, if you're lucky, it's accurate. If the economy goes to hell, then it's not, right? I mean, there's so many uncontrollables, you have no idea, but you have to have something, right? It's your game plan. If everything stays the same, right? And then here's where I want to be. Now, if a new steakhouse opens across the street and I'm the old steakhouse, I got problems. All right. So that type of thing here. So all you can do in budgeting is hope to put together a financial and budget plan is where you hope to be. Now, most of this is done on computers today. It used to be old paper and pencil. People sit down and do that. And it takes all sorts of things. You can buy budgeting type software. You can use, what's the name of that? QuickBooks. And they have that type of stuff. And you put a lot of your data in there and the computer will spin up a temporary budget for you. Forecasting, another one you want to circle, page 22. Forecasting is the process whereby managers, owners, and operators try to figure out where they're going to be. As we just said, there's no way to truly know where we're going to be, but a couple of things we do have. Okay, if we've been in business for a while, what information do we have that can help us to forecast for next year?
Previous year.
What happened last year? Okay. If you've been there for 5 years, you got 5 years of records to help you out. Now, many places like hotels and restaurants been open for a while. They can literally go back and look at the trends in certain days. So they can go back here. What's today? 26. They can go back the last 4 years on the 26th of March, how much sales did we have? How many customers did we have? And all that's going to help them to do their budgeting and forecasting here. With that in mind, we just said that many times budgeting is unpredictable. There are many economic and other things that occur that can screw up your budget. Just imagine, here we are, Virginia Beach. Now, last year we didn't have a hurricane, did we? All right, so we were lucky. How about if we had 2 this year? What would that do to the sales of hotels and restaurants at the oceanfront? Well, that would kill them, right? Every time we got a hurricane, we lose 5 days of sales, right? 5 days of people from Richmond and Charlotte, they're not coming down because I'm not going down a hurricane, right? And so whether you run a restaurant or a widget shop selling T-shirts or whatever, your business is going to falter. So advantages to budgeting: improves communication. Says here, allows everybody from sales, human resources, facility to know what the goals are. Provides a common goal. Provides for accountability. Now, one thing you do when you do budgeting is once you've got a budget, then we have to perform to the budget. So our budget for March right now is the 26th, correct? And when did I do my budget for March 2019? In maybe November 2018. All right. And so I looked at this month. Anything happened this month maybe that would have affected business, do you think? Were there weather? We didn't get any snow, but we certainly had plenty of rain and flood and stuff like that. You remember, I don't know, have we had one sunny weekend this year? No. So if you're a restaurant or a hotel that, thrives on the weekends, right, and it's raining and pouring and nasty, people aren't coming out. So you may look and find out here that, my sales are lower than anticipated because of the weather or other factors. All right. So it establishes a target, provides a control tool, requires what they call a little forward thinking in terms of what you need to do in the future to become competitive. All right. Are there rising prices of commodities, food, beverage, produce, meat? Also, what other things? Maybe the customer of the past was more interested in the old meat and potato diet. Now they're interested in what? What do all you young folk like to eat now?
Steak.
Robert, your old steak. Okay. What else? Come on. Leo, what are you eating? Organic, certified this, certified that, right? What's that? Baby food? What do you eat? Oatmeal. Okay. Computer lab, I've got some oatmeal stuck in the keyboard. Can you come clean that up? Thank you. All right, so we need to look at and consider those things. We need to consider both internal and external factors. All right. Let's say that your restaurant and you want to do an expansion. You want to expand the dining room. Well, once you do that, you probably have to close part of it, correct, in order to build it out. So maybe you're going to lose a few days or weeks or months in your expansion process here. We talked about the external environment. Those are things that are beyond your control. Let's say that the city decides they're going to do a big road project right on your street. All right. Well, that is certainly, that can be very harmful to your business, right? Because people are going to say, what? I'm not going over there wrecking my car, correct? Right? Anybody remember, some of you have been around for a while, remember when they redid, well, Kempsville's been a disaster, but the worst one ever was over at Virginia Beach Boulevard, Military Highway. Military Highway, right? The big overpass. Remember when they put that over? And Chi-Chi's used to be over there, and there's a batch of restaurants. Well, that thing took so many years that all the restaurants and everybody around there finally failed, right? There was a Denny's there. Denny's never closes, right? There's an Indian place. There's I don't know, Logan's. Is they still there? Logan's Steakhouse. There were a couple of places in there that just couldn't put up with the fact that people weren't pulling in there, right? Because you couldn't pull in and there'd be a 4-foot pothole and you'd die in a pothole on Military Highway. So, that type of thing here, and the city didn't offer any help to all those businesses. So many factors can influence that. Disadvantages to budget. Well, it takes time and effort. Everything costs time, and time costs money. Normally, this is part of the job of manager. But remember, a manager should be doing what? Managing, watching the dining room, taking care of customers. But this is one of the necessary evils you need to do, is preparing budgets. Forecasting, we talk about the need for that. Support. Budget process must support from top down. So if you're working for a chain or you have multiple units, you have to make sure that all the management and all the stores are working together. And then, of course, controlling the budget means controlling how much we can spend, staying on target. And the one thing about a budget we need to remember, if we don't hit our sales forecast, right? I forecast I'm going to do $100 in sales. If I don't hit $100 in sales, then the rest of my budget is going to have problems. Let's say I only get 90%. Well, then theory tells us then I should only spend 90% of my labor cost, 90% of my food, on and on. Now, what things I can't cut back would be the rent, the electricity, because, I'm open, I got to pay those. But everything I can control, those variable costs, I should be able to reduce them somehow, because I didn't hit my number one goal, which was my targeted sales number. Now, sometimes that's tough with labor. How come? Well, I already don't have a lot of extra labor, correct? And if I was to cut back from 2 cooks to 1 cook and I got busy, then I'd really screw everything up, because now the service would slow, guy couldn't get the job done, and that would hurt me even more. So, a lot of tough decisions you have to make when you don't hit your sales figures. In forecasting, as we look over here, now the book does a nice job in showing you a number of the different processes and how we go about that. But one of the most important things we have in a restaurant, would be the customer count. How many customers are coming in to eat in my restaurant? On the other hand, if we were talking about a hotel, we'd be talking about how many rooms are going to sell tonight. So as you look over here, the annual customer count can be done by doing the estimated forecast. Historical count, all right, in parentheses, historical customer count by percent estimated increase or decrease, and then you add those together to get your actual customer count. Now, that would be an annual count. But let's first think about what's more important than the annual count is how about this week's count? Okay, because we got to live in the reality of this week, right? So what am I doing for business this week, right? And so we use the same sort of figures. I look back at last year. What did I do last year this week? I look at all the factors. How was the weather? Blah, blah, blah. And then I forecast that. Now, one of the things over here that a manager has to do is he has to forecast in the middle of the thing here is a percent estimated increase or decrease. All right, so that's where we get into this tricky part, because I am now doing what? Guessing. All right, that's all I'm doing. I'm guessing, but I'm using what? Facts, figure, and my intuition and experience. But, it's still a guess. All right, so is it 1%, 2%, 3%? If you pump it up too high, you don't make the numbers, you look bad. If you keep it too low and you do make the numbers, then, you're close. All right, so that little number right there, the estimate, either increase or decrease, that's probably the job that managers have to work the hardest on. With an increasing number, all right, means we're going to serve more customers this year than last year. So in problem middle of page 25, we got 32,000, all right, and we end up with 32,946. So we plus around 650. All right, in the next one, we went down. So when we're going down, we have fewer. So we went from 32.3 to 31. So we lost almost 1,300 dinners that year. Now, this one is historical count. This was, I guess, annual count for a whole year. So 1,300 dinners over a course of a year, 365 days. That's only about how many? 365, 1,300, about 4 customers per night, right? So that's probably not going to cause you to close your operation down. 4 or 5 people either way is probably not going to affect you. But certainly in any business, we want to be moving forward, increasing sales, not decreasing sales. All right. Now, why is the customer count so important? Because at the very bottom of the page, we need the customer count to figure out our sales. Now, what's the other factor at the bottom page that we have that we need besides the expected customers? All right, we have our sales, but we also want to know what is our check average, which is what? How much does each person spend coming in the door? Now, check average could be set up in certain ways. It could be set up with all food, just food, and you could have a separate one for beverage, right? So if somebody had a $15 steak and a $5 beer, that's $20. Or you can just say the average check is $20 and you know it's 15, so that's very important. Someplace like a fast food restaurant, they track that. Every restaurant, no matter where you are, is always tracking your average customer sales. All right. The higher the sales per customer, the better off you are, the more revenue coming in the door. Now, customer sales, in this case, we take targeted sales divided by gives us our average sales per customer. 25, almost $26. So once we know what that number is, we can now again compare it to last year. All right. So obviously $26 per customer, that's $50 per couple. That's a pretty high-end restaurant, correct? All right. But no matter what kind of restaurant it is, from fast food at Mickey D's to Applebee's, everybody wants to know what the check average is. Forecasting revenue. As we look down in the corner of 26, we talk about growth. And here's where we might look at factors coming in from the government. The government forecast all sorts of different growth. Local, state government forecast what they think is happening. And they use a lot of statistics, and hopefully they do a good job. All right, and so you can use that as part of your forecast. In forecasting revenue, we look at the sale of food and beverage as the most important part of your sales. All right, that's where most of your stuff comes in. Okay, if you don't sell any beverage, now again, what is beverage? Beverage would be alcoholic beverages, beer, wine, whatever. So if you're just selling food like McDonald's, they don't sell any booze, okay, then all your money's got to come in from food sales. You might also sell some retail gifts and gags, coffee mugs, T-shirts. A lot of places sell those type of things here, but normally you don't make a lot of money on that, correct? It's just somewhere like that. Another source of revenue might be catering. You might have catering pickup or drop-off services, or you may have full-service catering. So that would be something that you'd also budget for. All right. Another way that sometimes restaurants can able to increase their sales without costing them too much money, right? You already got the building, got the staffers, so can I increase by doing some catering? How about inflation? What's inflation? Anybody remember what inflation is? Well, every quarter, the government tracks spending and the cost of certain commodities. And so most of you are relatively young, and inflation has been relatively low for the last number of years, probably 10 years, right? So low inflation, is that a good thing or a bad thing, do you think? Good, all right, because prices are not going up very quickly. Now, how about if you ran past the gas pump today on the way to school? Patrick, what did you find out? you were in horror, just like me, because it's back to 250, right? 2 months ago, it was $2, under $2. So you're screaming bloody murder like me, because I got 2 SUVs, okay? 38 gallons in my truck, all right? And so every time you go there, it's like pinch me, shoot me, feel me, steal me blind, okay? And so you're saying to yourself, why did the gas go up 50 cents in 2 months? And then no answer, right? Crickets. Ooh, we got the summer blend. We got the, what else? All the refineries are closing down. That's the other one, okay? Every year the refineries have to close down to fix their stuff. And so that creates a fake shortage. That gives them an excuse to rise prices, right? Now, I know you're all rich and you're driving BMWs, Mercedes, so it doesn't matter how much the gas costs to put in there, right? Because you're all rich college students, right? But, why am I bringing that up? Well, because if you put another 20 a week into your family gas tank, that's 20 a week we can't do what with? Spend going out to eat, right, Leo? Right? And so, think about that, It's go out to eat, have a good time, spend a little money on myself, or put gas in the gas tank so I can get to work for another week, right? So it has a real effect. And so again, although the economy has been pretty good and prices have been stable for commodities, things we buy, milk and eggs and cheese, prices have been pretty stable. This gas thing has a tendency to hurt a lot of people because everybody relies on their car today. And so that means you got less money to put in your pocket to go out and to eat and do other things. So let's look at the types of budget on page 27. We have long-term versus short-term. Now, the long-term budget's called the strategic plan, strategic budget, and that can be from 1 to 5 years. Typically, any type of business is looking at, how's my budget for this year? How about if I want to open a second or third store? What do I need to do to get there? So I have to put together a long-term budget. What's it going to look like? All right. Investors like to see a long-term budget. How come? Because before I ask them to invest in my restaurant, they want to be able to look and say, okay, well, this guy says he's going to open 3 new places and each one's going to generate this much profit, and I'm going to get my money back and whatever. Okay. So there's a lot of places to put money, and restaurants may not be the best one for a lot of people. All right. So long-term is a strategic budget. All right. The other budget is capital expenditures. And these would be for big high-ticket items like your stove, refrigerator, things like that. And these are things that normally, again, you have to replace. Maybe not that often, right? Stoves, stoves can last 10, 20 years, But how about your computer system? The average computer system, 3 or 4 years, it's old and whatnot. So things like that. So capital expenditures are those big ticket items that you have to replace. Also, if you wanted to buy a new piece of equipment, page 28 to talk about a combi oven. So you've been to the latest restaurant show and you saw this neat oven. You said, man, my place could really use something like that. A combi oven does dry roasting and steaming all in one piece of equipment, right? So it's pretty nice, but they're pretty expensive. So you say, well, I'd get rid of this old oven over here, put this one over here. So that'd be a capital expense. I need 10 grand to go buy one. All right. So then we have our short-term budgets. Short-term, and normally it says here for weeks, months, or quarter, combined with what they call the operating budget, which is your formal 1-year budget. So as we said, last fall, we put together a budget for 2019. As you're going through the month and looking at that, we have various short-term budgets. Like we would say we're in the budget for March. All right. Now, one thing about when you're budgeting in advance like that, you might also have to go back and do what? What kind of adjustments might you have to make? Well, you might see as you're going through the year that business is better than I thought, right? So instead of 2%, I might kick it up to 3%. So I go back, and what we do is called budget reforecasting. So I go from April to the end of the year, and I kick my number up from 2 to 3. All right, that type of thing here. So I forecast I'm going to do a little better than before. All right. Fixed versus variable budgets, flexible budgets. All right, same idea here that we talked about earlier in the last chapter. Something is fixed, meaning it's a certain percentage each and every month. Your budget for your rent is pretty much fixed. Flexible or variable is prepared based on several levels of sales activity. Okay. And so we look at these sort of flexible ones as related to, as we said earlier, if my sales increase, then I have more money to spend on food, more money to spend on labor, within reason, right? As sales increase, I'm going to be able to spend a little bit more money on these things. All right. What else we got there? 27, 28. All right, income statement. So what's an income statement? You want to circle that one and know what that term is. It may pop up on a test or a quiz, so you want to get it right. An income statement is a report of an operation's sales, expenses, and profits over a period of time. So for the average restaurant, that period of time is normally 1 month. All right. So most restaurants operate from the first of the month to the end of the month. All right. So as we look over here at the month of March, we're here at the 26th. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days left in the month. And so as we look over there, at the end of the month, we will put together our income statement. And that's going to have the sales. How much sales do we have? What were my expenses? What are some of the expense categories we're going to have on there? Well, rent. All right, so those. And then we're going to have our labor, right? How much did I have on labor? How much did I spend on food? And then I'll put all those together. And then hopefully what will be left over is what we call what? Profit. If we don't have any left over, it might be called a loss. Remember, losses are in parentheses, or sometimes they like to put them in red so they stick out. So revenue minus expenses equals profit.
What's the depreciation on assets like?
Oh man, Robert's going over the top now, Robert. Okay, that's one of them big highfalutin accounting classes there, Robert. Okay, depreciation. What's depreciation? Is where the government allows you to write off the expense over time for things like equipment. Remember, we just talked about the combi oven over there. All right, well, I got to borrow money to buy it, but then the government says every year you use it, the value goes down, correct? It's like a used car, right? You bought your new car, you spent $20,000. The minute you drove off the lot, how much is it worth, Patrick? $15,000, right? Because depreciation is horrible on a new car, right? So if you went to sell it back 3 months after you bought it, you'd lose $5,000. All right? So the government lets you write depreciation off as an expense of doing business. For most business equipment, like computers and automobiles, a business can write them off over 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and then it's not worth anything, right? So if you have this old stove in your kitchen that's 20 years old, you already wrote it off. Right? So it technically has no value. The restaurant guy might give you $100 for it or something like that. You can sell, but it has technically no value, right? That's why companies go out and buy new stuff. That's why I buy a new fleet of vehicles for my business. That's why I go out and buy a new computer system here, because the government allows me to write that off. Is that good enough, Robert?
Yeah.
Okay. So we look over here at revenue minus expenses, and we get the profits. All right, bottom page 29. Everybody wants to be in the black. We'll call you're in the black, you're profit. If you're in the red, you're in a negative. The job of the manager is always to try to maximize profit for his business. As we look on page 30, we can see our sample income statement. Now, this is pretty common. So as we're looking at this, on the top, we have our sales. As we look at our sales, we separate those between food and beverage. Food and beverage. So food was our sale of food, and beverage was the sale of liquor, beer, and wine. In this particular operation, we got the dollars over here, And the next we have is the total percent of sales. So what is 63.8%? What does that represent? How do we get to that number?
Percentage of sales.
All right. So if we added 850 plus 482, we get 1,332, 1,000,003. Okay. So 850 is what percent of 1,000,003? It's 63%. And 482 is 36. So in this operation, about 64% or about 2/3 of all your revenue comes from selling food, and 34%, 36%, about 1/3 comes from selling alcohol. All right, so everybody understand why that would be important. If this is McDonald's, you'd have no beverage, it'd be all food. Now, cost of sales is the next line. So to get $850 in sales, I spent $288,000 on food. And slide your finger over there to the right, and that was 21%. That's my food cost. So as we were talking about food cost the other day, we said that was what? It cost me 21 cents to sell the hamburger for $1. So that food cost is pretty darn good, isn't it? Below average. And the liquor cost is even lower. That's only 10%, correct? Well, so every dollar beer cost you 10 cents. You made 90 cents. You're living pretty large here, aren't we, huh? So the gross profit then is, all right, my sales minus my expenses, and they're saying our gross profit was 68%. Now, that 68% is great. Absolutely great. But what do we have to take away from that? The rest of the page, okay? We've got to take away our payroll. We've got to take our operating expenses, occupancy costs to get to the bottom line, right? So these are just sample numbers, all right? Salary and wages, about 31%. Direct operating, music, marketing, utilities, admin in general, repairs, that all takes up 21%. Occupancy costs, which would be your rent, appreciation on equipment, another 14%. So by the time we get down to the bottom line, our income before taxes was 4.1%. All right. So every dollar I only made 4 cents. And the government takes what? 1.4, leaves me 2.7. So on every dollar sales, I'm making 2.7 cents. Does that sound good to you? Well, you made money. That's a good thing. Did you make a lot of money? Not really. So how do we make money?
By upgrading it to charge when we sell it.
Plenty of sales. McDonald's makes money because what? Each day, tens of thousands of people go through the drive-through window, pick up food, right? Applebee's, Steakhouse, everybody makes money because they have a lot of customers. All right? So that's how you make money. You keep your costs under control, keep your numbers good, and then you have, hopefully, good, busy business model. So you have opportunity there. Prime costs and other costs, page 31. All right, prime cost, the goal here is to keep prime cost at or below 65%. So what is prime cost? Prime cost, I think we mentioned last week, was your food cost plus your labor cost, your two big costs. If you can keep them 60, 65, you're probably doing okay. If it's even lower than that, then that's great. It's even better. So you want to circle on page 31. You want to keep your prime cost below 65% for a full-service restaurant. If you're running a quick service, that number's a little lower at 60%. So McDonald's, again, due to their efficiency and everything, has a slightly lower cost factor. Generally, McDonald's, again, remember, McDonald's is buying not one hamburger bun, not 100, not 100,000, but 1 billion, right? So they're going to get the rock bottom cheapest price. McDonald's can sell a hamburger for $1 or $2, right? And though they may not make a lot of money, they can make some money, correct? But Patrick, he can't sell them for $1 because the darn hamburger patty costs 90 cents and the bun. So, you have to sell them for $1.50, maybe, right? So that's why McDonald's and bigger companies have a competitive advantage. Okay, Red Lobster. What do they feature? What kind of seafood? Right, lobster. Right now they got a lobster special going on. Well, probably about 6 months ago, Red Lobster said, you know what? In March 2019, we're going to have our big lobster fest or whatever it's called. I forget, right? And so they went out in the marketplace and they secured contracts to buy all the lobster they get their fingers on, correct? And so I agreed to buy this 6 months ago, and so I got a nice low price. All right, so I got lobster tails, whole lobster, whatever. And so they're able to now know 6 months out what their cost is going to be. And so when they set their prices and their advertising, they know that A, I'm not going to run out, and B, I'm going to make money on it because I bought it at the right price. So that's how big restaurants and big chains do things like that, is they buy in bulk in advance through all sorts of contract type deals. All right. So it's very important to understand. Other direct costs and expenses listed down on page 31. All right. Catering supplies, cleaning, pest control, right? You got to have somebody come in, the Orkin man. Do you have flowers? Linen services. Do you hire somebody to do your linens? Menu and wine list. Those have to get printed. Do you have a security system? Tableware, smallwares. Again, every month we're losing a few forks and knives, so we got to buy more. And then do you have uniforms? All right, so all these are just some of the major categories that we have over here, and these are the subcategories under direct operating expense, which was $63,000. All right. As outlined in Chapter 1, there are controllable and non-controllable costs. Separating controllable from non-controllable allows managers to calculate one of the most important margins on the income statement. That's controllable profit. Controllable profit is a primary indicator of a manager's effectiveness in meeting operational and financial standards. Controllable profit reflects only those line items over which a manager has any influence or control. So as a manager, as a chef, you have the control over what we said. What were your important items? Food cost, labor cost, right? And so you have to do a real good job controlling those because so many other things are uncontrollable. All right. Industry average indicates full service operations require a controllable profit of 18 to 20% in order to be successful. Quick service, 23 to 25%. So essentially what it says, is that you really only have control about a quarter of the cost because the other ones are sort of out of your hands, they're out of control. So you have to really control your little 25%. All right. And if you do a good job, then you can have a little money on the bottom line at 2 or 3% that we talked about. Now, reporting periods. All right. As you said, many restaurants use the monthly guide, so we have 12 reporting periods per year. Some of your big corporations like Red Lobster and Olive Garden, places like that, instead of doing that 12 months, they do it in a quarter. So a quarter would be 3 months. So they post results every 3 months because they're a publicly traded company. They do that every quarter. Okay. So right now, January, February, March. Next week in April, all American corporations, whether building hamburgers or widgets, will probably present their earnings for the first quarter of 2019. All right. And so that's what we're talking about here. Reporting periods. Okay. Because we're always watching our sales by week and by month, it's important to understand that the way the calendar works, and they mentioned this on page 32, some months have 4 weeks and other ones have what? 5. So we use what's called the 4-4-5 model, okay? And so when we're putting those together. So when we're comparing a month like February, which always has 4 weeks, right? We only look at February. All right, it would be unfair to compare February to March because March is traditionally a month that has 5 weeks. All right, so 5 weeks means you got an extra week of sales and you're going to have more money coming in. Now, with reporting periods for a typical restaurant, small independent owner restaurant, as we finish up next week, all right, what are we going to do on the 31st? What kind of activities are we going to do on the 31st? We're going to have physical inventory. How many people take an inventory? Inventory. Nobody. Okay. Chris, yes? All right. So what do you do when you take an inventory? So you're doing food and beverage or just beverage or? Okay. So in both the bar and in the restaurant, you would go into the storeroom, the freezer, and you would literally count how much of everything you have left. Now, the closing inventory for March then becomes the opening inventory for what? April 1st. All right. So when you left Sunday night, you had so much stuff in the freezer, you had the same amount on Monday morning. Now, in February, when you closed out, you took the same figure, you did a count. All right, so I had 10,000 there in the freezer. During the month, I bought another 20,000. When I got done, I had 10,000 left. So I spent 20,000 over the course of my 10 plus 20, 30. I had 10 left, so I had spent 20 during the month, right? And so that's what I'm going to compare to my sales. All right, so as we look over there, it's very important to keep track of your reporting periods and your income statements. Even the smallest restaurant always looks at, how did I do last month? Now, some restaurants, like a lot of fast food places, actually do this every week. So every Monday they're doing inventory and they're running their numbers every week. But for a typical place, next Sunday they'll close out the month, and then on Monday they'll put together all the facts and figures and say, here's how we did in March of 2019. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick break over here. We'll come back here and try to get something else going here. All right, so what time we got here? Take a quick 5-8 minute break here. We'll come back over here and get things rolling.
Well, Monday, Tuesday, I'm here in the mornings, and then Wednesday, and then I'll go work on Sunday, basically. I work on Monday, that's when Wednesday. Yeah, last night I was just, so sorry, yeah.
That's what I give a call.
Yeah.
Did you get my text about the free parking?
Not today, no.
Sent you yesterday.
Okay, you didn't take the quiz, so we need to take the quiz right now while we're on break because I can't wait around today. I have to leave. I got a doctor's appointment.
Yeah, I know. We gotta take it today.
What's that?
We gotta take it today.
Yeah. Okay. Enough special treatment here, man.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready. I mean, I'm not ready, but I'll.
All right, go back to course content by weeks. Look under week 1.
See, what's that other side?
Stop this for a second.
It's not logging again. Oh.
Okay,
Once you
get into class.
um,
Okay, go over the content by weeks. Look for week 1 folder.
what's that?
Look down there, you'll see a little red quiz.
I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Go with one. All the way down. More.
Oh. Mhm.
I mean, it's just as good.
All right, everybody back in action then? All right, so pick up over here on page 33, talks about the budgeting process. 4 stages of budgeting process. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to make sure you know what they are. We'll talk about them here. Make sure you know how they're laid out there. First step is to resources are allocated, efforts to make sure keep close to plan. Results are evaluated, corrective action. So first thing we need to do is come up with a budget, which is how much we're going to spend. And again, as I said earlier, that's normally based on our past trends. Now, the only problem we might have is what happens to a brand new restaurant?
You don't know.
You have no idea. You can just estimate based on your experience. So when I worked at this other place, we had 100 seats just like this place. I needed so many waiters, so many cooks. And so you just use your intuition to put that stuff together here. All right, so we need to figure out how much you're going to put into our, how much you're going to allocate. All right, and then we want to monitor that, keep it as close as possible. Step 3, results are evaluated. Now, the results means that we've looked at the month. So here we are next week. After the 31st, we look at our results and we see, All right, we hit our sales target, but my food cost percentage was high. What happened? Okay, so if I had a high food cost, higher than I expected, what might have been some problems? Anybody?
The quantity standards.
Somebody was giving out too big a portion, correct? That old chef who was cutting prime rib, instead of giving you 8-ounce slice, he said, I'm going to give this person 10 ounces. So every order was more than you anticipated, meaning it cost you more to put on a plate. What other problem might we had? Waste. That's another one. Okay. So somebody decided to throw something away. There was a lot of waste going on. They weren't cleaning out the cans, that type of thing. So we spent money or wasted money on food that we couldn't sell. Anybody else have another thing that might affect your results?
Comp checks, like something goes wrong or something they didn't like it.
Okay, well, that would affect to some degree. Usually write that off in the marketing expense. But how about if the price of steak went up? And so chances are the price of steak goes up this week. The menu price is already what? Printed, set in stone until we do what? A new menu, right? So you might have to live with that price over the course of weeks or months. Each steak you sell, you're losing a little money that you didn't plan on because the price of steak went up. And then last is corrective action. Now, corrective action means that I've got a problem, and we just identified my problem was my food cost was too high. So now I have to go back and do what? Find it, fix it. The sooner I get the problem identified, the sooner I have a fix, the better off I am. So, what can I do if the price of steak went up? Is there anything I can do, Patrick? All right, if I couldn't increase the price because the price is already printed on the menu, price of steak coming in the door is going up. Could I cut you a smaller steak? Yeah, but then I would be violating my menu because what's the menu say? 10-ounce New York sirloin, correct? So I can't lie to you. I can't cheat you, at least not on purpose. Okay. So maybe you just have to live with it. Some things you can't. Or you would try to maybe cut back on the specials for steaks, right? Because, and then maybe you'd come up with some chicken specials, right? And on your bulletin board, on your servers, you tell them, try to sell the chicken because I'm losing money on the steak. Okay? That type of thing here. So you have to come up with some corrective action. All right, so as we look down on page 34, budgeting revenue. Now, one of the hardest things is to forecast your sales. Remember, every day at 5 o'clock, you open the restaurant and you have no idea whether you're going to have one person or 100. Hit or miss. The only thing you rely on is, well, on an average Tuesday, I'm going to serve 100 people. That's all I can rely on. All right. Now, how about last night, right? Last night, who was outside last night? I had class. So, Leo, you're out last night, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it was nasty, correct?
Yes, sir.
Rainy and nasty. And so I can imagine over in your place, probably was a little slower than normal, correct? Because people don't want to go out when it's nasty and rainy and, crash their car or whatever, right? So, and that's the type of thing you really can't forecast over here. Because when you put your forecast back in November, you can't say, well, on March 25th, it's going to be really rainy. So, but as we look over there, we look at the weekly forecast, things like that. All right, so those are things that we have to do. In budgeting our sales forecast, the best thing we do is look at our old numbers and our new thoughts. Where do we think the business is going? If our business every month is getting busier and busier, then I'm going to look and say, okay, I'm going to be 3%, 5%, that type of thing here. So that's called your sales forecast. Making sure that we understand that. On the problem on page 35, we've got our daily days of the week, numbers of customers, the amount of sales, all right, percentage of weekly sales. And what does that mean there? What does that line mean? If you look on Saturday at 29.33%, what does that mean? So of all your sales, 26,000. All right. Almost 8,000 came in on Saturday. That represented 29% of your sales. So about 30% of your business came in on Saturday. 20% came in on Friday. So Friday and Saturday was 50% of your business. Does that sound like the restaurant business? Sure as hell does. All right. Everybody's coming at the same time. All right. And then the average check. Now, this is sort of mystifying to me. All right. So what do you think about the average check line over there? It goes from 19, 20, 22, 25, 26. How come there's a difference there? Anybody? All right. Good point, Chris. That's right. So if that included alcohol, maybe on Friday and Saturday, more people are willing to buy an extra cocktail or something, so spend a little more money or buy a nicer meal. You know, Sunday was very much low. Monday. So I don't know, maybe people don't spend as much money during the beginning of the week. Now, that's just generality. And for this particular problem, we don't really know what the answer is, but those are the things you would look at, correct? Now, if you knew that Sunday and Monday were your really slow out days, right? You have fewer customers and you also have them spending less money. What might you do to improve that number? What would you think about doing? What'd you say? Saturday, Sunday or Monday when it's slow. Yeah, come up with specials. Come up with some kind of dealie that might entice people to come back on your slow days and spend more money. Maybe you have a steak special on that night, or maybe you have a dessert special, right? Or you have a bottle of wine, whatever it is, So, restaurants always are looking at the numbers and saying, how can I do better? What could I do that maybe would improve my numbers? Okay. Sales forecasting for a new establishment, like we said, you really rely on your own information from the past, from your experience, and you're making a lot of it up. End of the day, you don't really know what's going to happen. All right. Remember, common belief is by many people is that when you open a new place, it's going to be busy. The common reality is, though, what? Exactly the opposite. You're new. You haven't got the word out. People haven't experienced you before. So it may take 3 or 6 months or something for you to start getting that business in the door. Things that could help you. How about a great location? All right. If you got a great location in the right spot, people are coming by. They're just going to come in by accident. All right. All right. Or you have a big budget for advertising, which most places don't. In budgeting your expenses, as we look across here, we know that restaurant companies report to groups like the National and State Restaurant Association, and they report some generic information so that other restaurateurs can look at that information and help in forecasting. And so what you might see again, on average, Restaurants Virginia sales increased 3% last year. So you say to yourself, well, I was at 2%. How come I'm not 3%? So all you want to do is look at how's other people doing when you can find those numbers, because it's very hard to get. Looking on page 36, food and beverage. The percentage of sales method involves estimating expenses for a future period as a percentage of sales. Now, this is the most common formula right here, page 36. You should remember that one. So we had $100,000 in sales, and our food cost is 34%. So I got a budget of $34,000. All right. In simple terms, you said what? So for every $1 hamburger or $1 steak, I spent $3.34. All right. If that was a $10 steak, and my percentage is 34%, how much did I spend on the meat to put the meat on the plate? What's 34% of $10? $3.40, right? So the steak cost you $3.40, put it on a plate. So if you think about that in terms of what's my goal, what's the food cost goal that I want for my business, and what I have to spend on it, and how much I need to sell for, then you'll be in good shape. Now, remember the food cost percentage, that's the average. Okay. And in any restaurant, some things are a little higher, some things are a little lower. Items like steak and chops tend to have a little higher food cost percentage than chicken because chicken's cheap to make and you sell at a good price. All right, so as you look down, break down by category. Now, again, it's very important to look at the various categories we got here: meat, seafood, dairy, produce, groceries, bakery. And those are all the different areas you have, and you're going to look at those. How much money overall do you spend on each of those areas? Obviously, the biggest spending is go on for meat and seafood at 20%. And that should make sense, right? The meat and seafood for your menu is the most expensive thing for you. All right. Then we have dairy, produce, on and on. So in this case, your food cost percent is about 35%. Food cost divided by total sales gives us the percentage of total sales for meat. So the $88,000 was the cost of meat divided into your sold sales. Now, if you're an outfit like Outback Steakhouse, where they sell predominantly what? Steaks, then that's going to be a bigger number. If you're working at the Lynn Haven Seafood House or something like that, seafood's going to be a bigger number. All right, if you're over there Kentucky Fried Chicken, well, obviously, chicken's going to be the big number. I don't even know they have anything else with chicken over Kentucky Fried Chicken. So it's important to keep track of things by your categories. Beverages, just like with food, we keep our beverages separate. Now, the three categories we're talking about there is wine, beer, and liquor. So why do we keep those separate? Why do we keep those separate? Because they're ordered separate, they're sold separately, but also they have different cost factors. Okay? So, typical wine, okay? If you got a bottle of wine, costs $10. Typical markup on wine is 50%. Means I sell it for 20. All right? So I made $10, a lot of money, right? I doubled my money. How about beer? Now, beer can be broken down into bottled beer, which is more expensive, and draft beer. Now, bottled beer, you mark up, you make a good profit on. Bottled beer costs what? $1.25. You sell for $5, $6, $7 like that, all right? But draft beer is really good for you. How come? Because it costs you like 30 cents and you sell for like $6. Okay? So draft beer would be more profitable for you. So we keep all these things in sort of different categories. And then, of course, liquor. Liquor is very profitable. Typical place on liquor is about 80%. Meaning, if you sold a drink for, I don't know, $1, 80 cents would be profit. 20 cents would be for the liquor. Sometimes the liquor's so cheap, the lemon wedge is more expensive than the liquor in the glass, correct? Right? So that's why that's so important. Now, in places like McDonald's that don't serve liquor, then they don't have that extra bump. As far as full-service restaurants, liquor sales have gone down over the years. How come? DWI laws, people are more healthy, people aren't drinking quite as much as they used to. So restaurants have had to suffer sort of a setback to some degree in the amount of liquor they sell in many places. So again, whether we're talking about food or beverage being liquor, beer, wine, the way we do the calculations and the way we keep track of things are very similar. All right, so don't be confused by that. The numbers, what we divide, they're all the same. Shrinkage, page 38. Now, there are many things that we can talk about that may be an indication of shrinkage, but in this case, we're talking about what? Products that were lost during either preparation, wasted, or even stolen. A a common term in retail is shrinkage. Walmart every quarter reports how much shrinkage they estimate happened at a store, which is how many people walked out with a big screen TV without paying, correct? I don't know how self-payout ever worked, those little counters everybody's got today. Because, when they first came out, it was like, it wasn't self, it was like no pay counters, right? People would just go there and, I got a $500 TV here and a gallon of milk, and they'd only pay for the gallon of milk and walk out. And, oh, yeah, I missed my TV. And everybody else would be paying for it. So shrinkage is talking about the yield and the weight percentage there. Utilization factor is the percentage amount of food that is served to the guest. So utilization factor would be how much good product, all right, how much usable product do we have? They use some new and different terms here than I'm familiar with in the past. Okay. AP and food beverage sales first. Food cost plus divided by sales gives you your food cost percentage of 40%, top of page 39. AP food cost times utilization 80% gives you actual food cost of 320, which ends up with your food cost percentage as 32. Labor cost. As I said, labor cost is based on your average wages plus how many hours employees are working. In this case, though, we also have to include in benefit cost. And what might be some of the benefit costs that we have to incur in this if we want to get a real accurate figure?
Sure.
If you provide maybe insurance, or how about time off, like vacation or sick days? All right, so you come up with a number, a percentage to add into there, and they're called our beverage cost. All right, so as you can see over here, somebody who's making $8 an hour isn't costing the company $8 an hour, but actually costing them $10 an hour because you've got a $2 benefit package there. Now, as an employee, do you ever see the two? No. It's given to you, paid for by the company. So the net cost, you're still making $8 an hour, but it's costing the company $10 to have you. And that would be fairly typical in many jobs. Boss also to pay extra for you. Part of that is Social Security. Social Security, again, is 7.65%. When you start looking at your paycheck and you see Social Security and Medicare tax, that's money that doesn't come back to you till when? Till you're old and ready to retire. All right. So you can get to pay for that. We talked about that last time. You can pay for it like me for the next 50 years. Okay. Moving on, page 41. One of the simplest ways to determine labor budget is using your targeted labor cost percentage times your sales. So in this case, we budgeted our sales about $50,000. Our labor cost percentage, our goal was 23. So we've got a budget $11,500 as our weekly labor cost. Now, this is where the chef and the manager have to work because they would have to take their budget and try to keep it within that $11,500 number. Remember, again, with labor, you got some people that are salaried. That's going to be the managers and chefs. So they get paid whether it's busy or not. And then the rest of your labor budget is going to be made up of your hourly workers who may be working 40 or 30 or whatever you need them to work. All right, so you'd have your labor budget. Your goal is 23%. And when you do your schedule, you're going to try to forecast based on that. One of the problems in any restaurant is you never really know from day to day are you going to be busy or slow. So in order to be safe, typically restaurants schedule a little bit heavier with extra staff because if it's busy, they want to have enough people to get the job done. If it's not busy, what do they often do, Leo? Cut people, send them home. Anybody who's worked in this business has probably either volunteered to go home or been sent home early. Now, one thing about people in the restaurant industry is they don't mind going home early, particularly if they're waiters and waitresses and it's slow. How come? No business. You're not going to make any tips, so you're just standing around. Okay? All right, so look over here. We got our labor hours for the year, number of days. hours per day available. So this is taking a look at it from an annual basis. I like to think about let's do it for a weekly basis, and then a monthly basis, and an annual basis. But it is what it is here. All right, then we got hours per day, percentage of full time, total number of hours or dollars. That's what we're looking at. 125 hours divided by times 850 is about $1,062 per day in wages. All right, then we look at part-time labor, full-time labor. So you can see over here, it's basically pumping the numbers in to the calculator. All the numbers are very easy to calculate, so you shouldn't have any problem with that. The hard part is trying to figure out exactly how many hours you're going to have in order to stay within budget. Now, the good news about that is that in a lot of the modern computer programs that restaurant managers use today, computer program, as you put employees in the schedule using some kind of Excel spreadsheet, what's it doing over on the side? Calculating automatically the hours and the dollars. And so it generally won't let you go above your budgeted number. Right. So then as you're putting in the schedule, and you got all the way through Saturday, and guess what? You got no money for anybody to work on Sunday. So now you got to go back and make some changes. When you were doing that, Leo, did you have to do that on your place where they had?
Yeah, we use QuickBooks too.
QuickBooks, okay. And that would able to help
There's
you.
a little bit of everything. We did like the paychecks to them, and the application we just put it in, and it has all like our vendors' names and stuff like that. Just click on it, it's put in there, just.
All right, so Leo is using QuickBooks, which is a commercially available product that restaurants can use, and there are a lot of specialized restaurant programs. McDonald's has their own version, Burger King, Applebee's all have their own software, but if you're a small independent, QuickBooks would work for you. All right, other expenses, as we're looking on page 42, we've got a lot of expenses here. We said our food and labor are big ones. Marketing, advertising, 4 to 6%. Some of these expenses we might be able to fluctuate a little bit. Electricity, power, rent, probably not so much. Now, it's no doubt, again, just like at home, in the winter, you spend more money to keep your house hot. In the summer, you spend more to keep it cool. And so average restaurant's electricity bill is going to go up and down. How about marketing? Marketing usually is a pretty important expense. How come? Because if I cut it away, then there's no way for me to advertise my services and get people in. So most businesses spend money on marketing. They may spend it on TV advertising. They may spend it on internet advertising. They may spend it on newspaper advertising, okay? But most of the advertising today is where? Through the internet, through all these different websites and things. When you click on something, it's going to be there, whether it's a restaurant or whatever. Other expenses, cost per customer. Now, every customer coming to the door costs you some money. If you have a full service restaurant and you have a tablecloth and you have napkins, all right, all those are part of the cost, right? So if it costs you, let's say, 50 cents for a tablecloth and 30 cents for a napkin, every customer is going to cost you a certain amount of money. So you need to try to figure that out, right? So that would be your spending on supplies and budgeting, things like that. All right, budgeting for profit. Now, theoretically, what we would like to do is budget for profit. How come? What does that mean? It means that at the end of this exercise, at the end of the month, I will have a profit to show. Unfortunately, the way many people look at profit is, well, here's my expenses, here's my sales, subtract that. What's left over is my profit. But the problem with that is, as we said earlier, if my sales or costs are wrong, then maybe there's nothing left. So the theory here is that by budgeting for profit, there'll always be some profit for me, right? Because I'm putting that right in the budget. I want to make 10 cents on every dollar. That's my bottom line. All right. Rather than hopefully wait to the end of the month and see if I made any money. So the way we do that is we have revenue, income minus required profit equals ideal expense. Another term on page 43 you want to circle is return on investment. And this would be how much money is coming back to your investors. Now, restaurants have a very hard time finding investors, people to invest their money in your restaurant dream. How come? Anybody? Why would it be hard to find investors? Because restaurants, unfortunately, have a very long history of high failure rate. And a lot of investors will not invest in something if they're going to lose their money. Remember, when I'm talking about losing money, you're losing your principal, your investment, $10,000, plus what you were hoping to make was $1,000 a year in profit, right? So restaurants are very, very tough businesses here. Banks don't like to lend restaurants money. You know, a lot of restaurateurs, when they get started, who is their banker? Where do they get money from? Family, friends, people you know, people that believe in you and think you're going to be able to operate a good restaurant, okay? And so that's where you go there, because the banks may not lend you any money, correct? Mm-hmm. All right, so as we look over there, break even. Now, break even is very easy to understand. That's the point where you're either what? You haven't lost any money, haven't made any money. Everybody's goal is to get to break even and then beyond. Now, as I said, we're already at the 26th of the month here. When do you think the average restaurant, what day of the month do you think the average restaurant breaks even? 15? Man, oh man, you're awful ambitious. Okay, Jordan saying near the end. I'm saying anywhere from maybe the 26th, 28th. All right, which basically means the whole beginning of the month, the first 3 weeks, I'm doing nothing but what? Paying the rent, my expenses, and then the last couple of days is when I actually make any money. Okay, so that's typically, now again, the sooner you can start making money, the better. But you know, with so high overhead and competition and everything else, you know, oftentimes you're not making any money till the end of the month. Now, let's look at this month. Friday's the 29th, Saturday's the 30th, Sunday is the 31st. What happens if another big gigantic storm comes in with rain or snow this weekend? So you just about made money over here, and then the last couple days, nothing happens, and so your profit's going to be really small, right? So that's the type of thing that plays havoc. Restaurant is we talk about weather and other factors. All right, looking at break even. All right, shows you what the break even calculation is over there. Adding together all your basic expenses to try to figure out what your weekly expense number is and how much you need to cover. Now, typically, restaurant owners and operators have an idea about break even. It may not be calculated in terms of dollars, but more likely, if you're a restaurant guy, you know how many dinners, how many covers you need to serve this week to hit break even, correct? You know, so by Friday, Saturday, by the time Saturday gets here, you know, I need to have served 900 dinners out of the 1,000 I need for the whole week, right? You know, so I know my nut is 1,000 dinners. So the closer I get to 1,000, the better off I'll be. Budgeting. Actual results minus budgeted data equals your variance. Now, variance can either be positive or negative. If your variance is positive, then you had more sales than you expected and you did better. If your budget on page 45 is negative, then you had fewer sales and you didn't make as much money as you thought. So can everybody see how that's tied together over there between actual budgeted and the variance? Remember, your actual results is how you actually did. The budget is what you hoped for. So if we did better, we have a positive. If we did poorly, we had a negative. Actual results minus budgeted divided by budgeted is our percentage of variance. All right, so why is the percentage important? Well, I'd like to know, was I 5% slower or 10, or was I only 1% slower? Now, in the business world, anytime there's a variance, plus or minus, your investors and people always want to know why. Okay. If it's 1 or 2%, maybe that's a non-issue. But how about if it's 1 or 2% on $1 billion? How about if you're Apple? All right. Our friends over at Apple, right? If Apple sales comes out next month, Tim Cook comes out and says Apple sales are down 1%. And what would the investors say about Apple? Well, they're in trouble. How come? Because they looked at the 1% and said they didn't sell as many iPads or iPhones, blah, 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 right? And so they might have to come out with a new product. That's, how we look at that. Apple is one of those companies that's right up there at the top of the world in everything they do. And so they have to respond, Recently, they came out with the iPhone 10. I know you all probably have those, what are they, $1,100 each or something like that, right? So they just recently came out with some new Apple stuff that wasn't all that grand. Anybody have those earpods, iPods, whatever, earpod things? So they just came out with a new model. And it's that much better. And it's another $100. Okay. So Chris is back there. I already got my old pair. I ain't buying another one, correct? But they're hoping over here that Leo, big money, he's going to go out and buy the new one because, hey, that's the new earplug, right? And so they're coming out with new products and services to try to raise up their sales because Leo's already got the iPhone 10 and he's not going to get rid of it for a while, right? Because it's got to take you 3 years to pay it off, right? So, 4 years. Okay. So we want to know what the variance is, either plus or minus. If it's good or bad, take that in consideration. Now, again, if the variance for March was low, you might go back and, as I said, the weather was really bad. 3 out of 4 weekends it rained, so that's why. So you'd look at April and you say, okay, well, is April going to be the same or worse? And so all this really is a little bit about looking at things, weather, and trying to figure out. Assessing results. One thing the manager has to do when we close the month down, so next Sunday and Monday, managers will put together their reports. They'll look at the figures and numbers, and they will have to determine, how do we do? Did we hit our targets or were we off? What were the problems? What can we do to change things? All right. As we look over here, your budgeting results, page 46. All right. You got budget in one category, actual in the next, and then we have variance. And that's the column you want to focus on. All right. If it's black, it's good. If it's red, it's negative. So beverage sales are off. So we forecasted 482 in beverage sales. We only had 450. We're down by 26,000. Okay. Other places we had here. Salary and wages. We budgeted 346. We spent 358. So we spent too much. Benefits. Because we had more labor expense, we had more budget expenses for benefits. So as we look over here, we look at our cost, and our variance was 47,000. And that's a lot of variance, considering, we're hoping to have 843, but we actually had 890. All right, so that's a lot of money difference. So once I look at these variances, once I look at the problem, then the next stage and last thing is take corrective action. What can I do to fix it? Can I cut back on payroll? Can I increase prices? Can I have more specials? All these things we need to look at in order to try to turn things around. Do I need to increase my check average? How can I sell more items? How can I do that? You know, do I need to have a special on appetizers? You know, every appetizer, $7, $8, $10. You know, right now only 20% of people buy an appetizer. If I can get that number to 30 or 40%, I can increase my profits. So hopefully you understand as we wrap up today that budgeting is very important for the managers, owners, operators, and it will be if you tend to be a manager or a chef or something like that, because you have to help to keep the numbers in line. As we said, in many operations today, your payroll, your budget, your salary is part salary, but also maybe part what? Performance bonus. So if you keep your food cost in line and you stay on track, you can get more money in your paycheck. If you don't do a good job, then maybe you don't. So everybody has to work towards those common goals. So as you see in chapter 2, there was another problem there. All right. Your practice or review questions. Are the answers in the back of the book? Did anybody find the answers? Where the heck are they? I'd have to look online and see where they are, I guess. All right, what else we got over here to wrap up for today? All right, so today we just did one chapter, so we'll have one quiz next week. We'll work on chapter 3 next week. I'll try to rework the schedule a little bit there. Anybody have any other things I can think of before we check out today?
The parking for the Cutler,
Free.
where?
Okay, so what are we going to do with that, Robert?
Yeah, just put it in front of the hotel.
Okay.
And, just